First thing we will do is demonstrate PowerFloat accessory equipment, and we will begin with the Speculums. PowerFloat makes two Speculums. One is a wind-up version, and the other one is a more traditional type Speculum that in North America we call the McPherson. In Europe it's probably called the Houseman, and it has ratchets on the side. So firstly, the features of the PowerFloat Speculum is it is a very safe speculum in that it cannot collapse on you. The mouth is open with these turning dials. It takes approximately 35 seconds for me to open the mouth to the full amount. Once the mouth is opened to the necessary level, which is, it should be a distance of 9 centimeters between the incisor plates, then it's open adequately enough. Then you can see we have great side entry into the mouth, and the incisor plates are very wide. So when this speculum is installed on a horse's mouth, it is very safe. This speculum cannot collapse on you. The speculum comes in a package, plastic package, and is simply put together by the veterinarian when they receive it. In order to add some friction to the turning handles, we use some ice hockey tape and just wrap it around the handles. The handles are stainless steel and could be slightly slippery for some people without the use of this tape to add for friction. This speculum can be put on the horse's head with the arms in the up position, which is the way that I do it primarily, but it can also be installed on the horse's head with the turning handles down. There are buckles on both sides of the pole so that it doesn't matter whether you have this in the up position or the down position on the horse's head. You will still be able to stand on the left side of the horse and do up the pole strap to tighten the speculum. This is my personal speculum. It is approximately 6 years old now, and I expect a speculum like this to last a lifetime. The other speculum carried by PowerFloat is, the special features on it is the notches on the side. In most McPherson or Houseman speculums, there's 3 notches to open the incisor plates to an opening distance of 9 centimeters. This one has been modified so that it's on the 5th notch so that it's open. This makes this speculum easier to open. It is a fairly wide entry into the side of the mouth. The incisor plates are somewhat smaller, like most Houseman speculums, but it's a very good speculum and it's light. This is one of the clinic speculums, and I just want to show you, this is open now it's in the 5th notch. And the 5th notch gives you an approximate opening at the front of 9 centimeters. It's important to be able to have a speculum that can open to 9 centimeters so that you can gain access into the back of the mouth where the hooks are. Some speculums do not have enough iron in the incisor plates and will not hold on to our power light, which I will show you. This is double-sided tape which can be pressed onto the underside of the incisor plates, and then the light can attach to that even in a speculum that does not have any iron in the incisor plates. The PowerFloat speculum, both speculums have iron so that they can hold on to the power light. The power light is mounted on the horse's head, and there's a switch on the side, and you can see that this is a very, very bright light shining inside the mouth. The power light can be moved around from side to side or easily taken off to put your hand back in the mouth. This particular speculum can be difficult to open on the last notch for some people. Even though this one opens more easily than most McPherson or Houseman type speculums, some people have trouble getting it open to the total depth. And we've made this is a wolf tooth extraction forceps that has notches in it, and we've made it so that people who aren't strong enough can open the speculum all the way to the 5th notch. It's a forceps that is requested by a lot of people in North America, just to help them open the speculum on these horses that really have a strong bite. The power light, which we use, as previously mentioned, sits onto the upper incisor plate with a magnet. The power source has 6 AA batteries, and it is clipped onto the dental halter above the horse's head with this clip, this carabiner clip. Some people will clip it on the side of the speculum, but we prefer that it's clipped up on the dental halter. This is a very bright light, and it only goes on the upper incisor plate. On the lower incisor plate, the tongue would be in the way of the light. This is a very popular item with veterinarians because by using this, they don't have to wear a light on their head. The 6 AA batteries will last for approximately 5 to 6 hours of continuous use, so it usually takes a week or so of floating before the batteries need to be replaced. I personally use rechargeable AA batteries for this light. This is an examination mirror made by PowerFloat. The features of this mirror are that it's not round. It has, I've turned it into a round nose on a rectangle. And the reason for that is the round mirrors are so tight in the back of the mouth. When you get into the back of the mouth of the horse, it's so tight at the back you can't get the mirror pushed out against the cheek. This narrower, longer design makes it much easier to examine the horse with a mirror in the back of the mouth. In order to work on the incisor plates, we make a plastic mouth gag that will sit in the mouth in the diastema. So in order to work on the incisors, we have to keep the mouth clear of any bite plates. So this is a plastic speculum for smaller horses, and we also have a larger plastic mouth gag for big horses. So this will allow, the placement of this gag in the mouth will allow a person to take off hooks and diagonal bites and smiles from abnormal incisor malocclusion situations. Approximately 25% of horses will need a little bit of incisor work, so these mouth gags are very important to have. The PowerFloat system is a quick connect system. All of the shafts that fit onto the power source are quick connect. So this is the Mini-Max drill, which has a small 20-volt battery on it. This particular power source does not spin as fast as the larger one, but everything adapts to the Mini-Max just as it does to the larger gun. This is called the guarded right angle. It is a solid shaft with a right angle gear system and a guard which protects the tongue and cheek from this grinding wheel, which is got a diamond surface on it to grind away at the teeth. And this particular shaft, like all of them, will click onto the PowerFloat. This is the up position to do the upper teeth, and it clicks on into down position for the lowers. One of the important features of the guarded right angle is that it has a very narrow shaft, and so that when you're trying to get into the back of the mouth, you can tilt the right angle past the opposing arcade and slip in sideways and get into a very small area in the back of the mouth because of this narrow right angle tool. There's a little butt bar on the end to push mucosa back when dealing with the last upper tooth. All of these particular right angles have a grease port to grease the gears inside. There's a grease port sitting here. There's another grease port back on the shaft, and behind this grease port is a grease seal to prevent grease from going down the shaft. This cover, this black cover, covers the opening into the shaft, which is an exit for the grease to come out when the grease procedure is being done. After greasing, the cover is rotated back over the opening. So this is the right angle shaft. The next most important one is an unguarded right angle, which will accommodate this chamfer burr. This is a 45-degree reverse cone that is guarded, and this burr is only used for floating the sharp enamel points off the outside of the upper arcades and the inside of the lowers. It is very fast and it fits very tight against the teeth. It clicks on just like the other burr. You can see the bushing guard here protects the cheek or the tongue so that you can float either at a very slow speed or a much faster speed. This is for the upper rights, and you can switch it to do the this is for the upper right arcade and the lower left arcade. You can switch it to do the upper left and lower right arcade. This attachment is not a right angle, it's a straight rotary shaft. It clicks on just like the other ones. And on the end of this we can put several different types of burrs depending on what we need to do with this shaft. This shaft is sold with these three major connections at the end. It comes as a package, and I'll show you how each one goes onto the shaft from this group over here. So this is the shaft, and on the end of the shaft there is a nut which can be unthreaded, and inside underneath this nut cap is a collet to grasp onto a shaft. So we simply put the collet back on. Once on, we have a variety of things that we can do. This particular burr is called the upper 11 burr, and it is to burr the back edge, the caudal edge of the last upper cheek tooth, the hook on the last upper cheek tooth. And it's assembled with this guard. So the way this is assembled is, first of all, this attachment goes in and is tightened. It's tightened by putting this pin through the hole, and the wrench is used to tighten this attachment to the collet. The next thing that happens is this open end guard is put on. And lastly, the flared end burr, the upper 11 burr, is tightened onto the attachment, finger tight, and this is ready to go. So this burr is smooth on the side that would come up against the mandible. So if this was the tooth, it would be burned against the caudal edge of the tooth here. It would be sitting behind the tooth, and this part would be smooth against the mandible. This burr is only used on the upper 11. It's at the wrong angle to float off hooks on the lower 11 tooth. Most of the time, this would be the burr that would be left on this shaft until something specialized was going to be done. The next burr that can go on here is for the last lower tooth, the lower 11 tooth. This also has a smooth edge, but in this case, this hooks onto the back edge of the last lower tooth, and the round edge pushes the gum back just enough so that you can burr the hook off the last lower 11 tooth. So in other words, this attachment can use both burrs, the upper 11 and the lower 11 burr. Now to put this other guard on, we simply on-thread this guard, and we're going to put in a small burr so that we can work on miniature horses. In this case, this burr slides into the collet, is tightened, and then this guard slides on over top. So we now have a guarded rotary burr that is approximately 3/16 of an inch in diameter. You can see it has a very narrow height to it. In the back of the mouth of a miniature horse, if we're trying to float the back teeth, we would be looking at a distance that high, and it gets very tight in the back of the mouth of a miniature. You can see that this rotary burr is a third the height approximately, and there's enough room to get this burr into the back of the mouth of a miniature horse or a miniature donkey. This is the chamfer burr for large horses. You can see that this is the same one. The large chamfer burr is too big for miniature horses. So if you wish to use a chamfer burr on minis, we have to go to this smaller size. So this burr fits on this right angle just like this, but it's small enough that you can get into the back of the mouth of a miniature horse. It is removed by locking the shaft. You turn the wheel until the shaft lines up with this hole, and then it slips into the hole. That locks the shaft. So now we are able to undo the chamfer burr by putting in this Allen wrench and simply unscrew the burr. The guard sits over top of the grinding surface and is held in there with this screw, which screws into this unguarded right angle. In order to remove the flat grinding disc on the guarded right angle, it's a similar procedure. We simply find the opening into the shaft, then we lock the shaft, turn the wheel to lock the shaft. Now it's locked, and we have a wrench that will grab over top of the grinding wheel, and you simply just unscrew it. You take the wheel off, and put a new wheel on. You simply thread it in. All of these wheels must have a washer between the grinding wheel and this point right there. The washer and a new wheel is put on simply by turning it on finger tight. You can give it a little more tightness with the wrench, but it's not particularly necessary. If you look at the burr from the side, it should be slightly above the guard. If it's not above the guard, it's too difficult to float the back of the mouth. And that's why there's a washer underneath this wheel to elevate it up enough so that we are above the guard. There are two cordless PowerFloat models. The larger model, which is a 20-volt lithium, spins at up to 3,800 to 4,000 RPMs at max, and it has a more powerful motor. It weighs a little more than the smaller motor. This particular motor weighs a third less than the larger one. It's a brushless motor, but its maximum RPMs are 2,850, so it spins the wheel at a slightly slower RPM. And it makes a high-pitched sound, but veterinarians should be wearing ear protection with either motor. This is quite satisfactory for people who have elbow injuries or shoulder injuries and they can't stand too much weight. One advantage to this chamfer burr, though, is that when you're floating, you don't have to turn your elbow out, because when you're removing the sharp edges, the gun is being held straight up and down. So it's very easy on your arm. If you're using nothing but the right angle to take off sharp enamel points, you would have to tilt it to float off the sharp enamel points, which means your elbow is turned out, and that is a little harder on people that have bad shoulders or elbow injuries. So the chamfer burr makes floating much easier just because of the way you're holding the gun in a natural position. This attachment can be purchased by people who want to work on incisors, and they have shoulder injuries, and it's difficult for them to get far away from the mouth. So this is basically a short right angle used only on incisor teeth. And this allows you to get close into the horse, and ergonomically it's easy to use. Personally, I use the long shaft on incisors, and I just use my arm longer, and I support it like this when I'm working on incisors. So this is a specialized tool, generally for people who have a shoulder or elbow problem. This is also for incisor teeth, but it is a short rotary shaft, and it is not as easy to use on the incisors because you have to steady it. It's a little harder to keep it steady than the wheel, but it's much cheaper because this is a right angle. It costs almost as much as the full-size right angle, and this is a cheaper unit to purchase. This short right angle, unguarded right angle, has an apple core burr on it, and it is inserted into the gun in this manner so that the apple core is rotating towards the tooth. I use this for a bit seat, which will be demonstrated later on the lower sixes, on the front edge of the second premolar lower teeth. And you can blunt the front edge of those teeth very easily right down at the gum with this small apple core burr. There are some people who prefer a larger apple core burr, and this can be put on this long shaft if you wish at the back, for the back of the mouth, or it can be put on this shaft for doing bit seats. Again, I would keep the right angle in this position so that the wheel is rotating towards the teeth. If you were going to float in this position, the wheel would be rotating away from the tooth and would tend to migrate down to the gum, and it would not be a very safe way to be floating teeth. So it should always be in this position. All of the, this is a straight rotary, so there's no grease ports on it. No greasing is necessary because the bearing is back in the shaft, and there's no reason to grease this. Every one of these right angle gear systems, long or short, require greasing. And each one has two grease ports, one on the shaft and one near the gears. And while dentistry is being done, the grease ports tend to fill up with tooth chalk. And you can see that if you look in here, there's a silver ball inside the grease port. Underneath the silver ball is a little spring, which the spring-loaded check valve will get clogged up with tooth chalk if you don't clean these properly before you grease. So the procedure is to clean the tooth chalk out of the well before you grease. Never grease these until you can see the silver ball. This is what let's get rid of this a little bit down here. This is what the grease port looks like. And this is an extraction screw. So if one of these grease ports were to fail, this screw remover is tapped into the grease port and pulled out with this extraction device, and a new grease port can be pressed into the hole. And we sell these as a kit to veterinarians who wish to replace their own grease port if it happens to fail. The type of grease that is used is a food grade grease. It is supplied, one of these tubes is supplied with each gun, and you should look on, if you're going to get a supply in Europe, you should be looking for a grease that is food grade, and it's also made for gears, and it has anti-rust properties. That is the desirable type of grease to use. So the grease is, this is put into a regular grease gun, and from this tube, the grease is pumped into this. There's a plunger here. You pull the plunger out, and then you fill this up with grease with the grease gun, put the plunger back in, push down, and it's ready to used as a grease gun. In order to grease one of these units, I'll use this one. You first of all open the exit port for the grease, which is the same hole that you lock the shaft in. Turn it over, pull this one is tight at this moment. It was too greasy on the end. So this cover is pulled off, and this grease gun is open here. You simply find the grease port and push down on the grease gun and pump the grease slowly into the mechanism. It took a minute for this gun to get primed, but now it is primed because this is a brand new gun. And you can see the grease exits out of the port there. Now I'll grease this part. And you can see the grease exit out of the port. Simply clean it up, and the procedure is done. Over time, there are ball bearings in here, and over time, as things wear a little bit, the grease will come exuding out around the edge of the grinding wheel. This is normal because it's just oozing through the ball bearings underneath the wheel. This device is greased exactly the same way as previously demonstrated. It is important to put grease into this gun after every day because the gears inside are made of hard carbon steel and they are subject to corrosion. Stainless steel gears are not strong enough, so you never put this device away at night without grease in it. Otherwise, I tend to do 8 or 10 horses before I re-grease it. But every night before I put it away, I always put grease inside the chamber to protect the gear mechanism. This is the long rotary shaft to access the mouth in miniature horses. I would like to illustrate how you get to the back of the mouth. The shaft is introduced diagonally over top of the tongue into the opposite cheek, and the guard will push the cheek out just enough that you can float off the sharp enamel points on the outside of the uppers. The front can be done with the rest of the tool. This is only needed to get to the back. So you can float off the sharp enamel points, you can float off high spots, put it in the down position for the lowers. You still go across the mouth over the tongue. You can get access to the last hook, float it. You just have to steady it with your hand. This is is how you access the back of the mouth in a miniature horse. From that angle, of course, from this side, you would be going in like this, diagonal across the mouth to get to the back. The guard pushes it out, you can get the sharp enamel points, plus you can float off any tall points on the occlusal surface. And of course you spin it to get the inside on the lowers, and you can take off the hook on the back and float the last two teeth that are not very accessible. Once you get to this area here, this whole area from the third or fourth cheek tooth back is accessible with the right angle tool. The chamfer burr The key feature of the chamfer burr is it's introduced into the mouth, and you can see that it gets really tight against the teeth. In a straight up and down position, it gets really tight against the teeth. So it's introduced into the mouth, and you float off the sharp enamel points all the way to the back. It'll even go around the corner just a little bit. If you want to get the cingula reduced just a little higher, you simply rotate it outwards a little bit to float a little bit higher up on the tooth. So you do the outside of the uppers, and then you flip it over, and you go in and do the inside. You do the outside of the upper. It's on the gun in this position, and then you come into the lower arcade and do the inside of the lowers. And then you flip it over, and you'll do the outside of the uppers on this arcade. And you'll come down inside and do the inside of the lowers. With the right angle grinding tool, you can get sharp enamel points, but you see that the right angle is sticking out against the cheek much further, so it's a little harder to push out the cheek at the back of the mouth. It is used to access the chewing surface anywhere, top or bottom of the arcade. A lot of times when you go in, you're able to access the back of the mouth here by rotating it on, and you should be able to visualize the wheel going onto the tooth. So it is used to reduce the table surface of the teeth. I also use it in the mouth sideways for smoothing the front edge of the teeth, as in bit seat. On the lower arcade it can also be done, but the mandibular frenulum in this area can get in the way, and you have to pull it aside to get to it, inside and out. There's a technique to do that. However, it's easier for me to go in the mouth with this apple core and blunt the front edge of this tooth. So doing this, I simply grab onto the tongue, grasp the tongue, pull it sideways. This right angle pushes the cheek out, which tightens the frenulum, and I can start right at the gum line, and I can smooth this knife edge of this tooth out. Then I simply flip the tongue over top of the shaft, and then I pull the cheek out with this finger, and I come across here and I do this one. And this way the wheel is always turning towards the tooth to get the bit seat. These are Diastema Burs. They come as a set of 3, and they are used to burr a path between teeth that have food trapped in them. If they have a true diastema with a valve diastema with food packed between the teeth. So each burr will thread into the float, and it will spin. This is a tall diastema burr. We have shorter ones as well. but it is introduced into the mouth, and burring will take place somewhere. Let's say we have a diastema back here. We would simply get this positioned and we would burr a path between the teeth to open it up so that the food material can pass back out. Valve diastemas are very painful for the horse, and if we can widen the space between the teeth, we can eliminate the periodontal disease. So that is the narrowest. Some teeth are wider apart and require a wider burr. This last burr is 4.5 millimeters in diameter, and that would be the widest space ever needed. This is the PowerFloat dental halter, used to support a horse's head so that a veterinarian can do dentals alone without any assistance. So to do this in a stall front, the rope is thrown over from the inside to the outside so that the rope does not cross. It's inserted into the cleat, and it can be lowered or raised by flipping the rope out of the cleat, and it can be lifted up by allowing the rope to get locked in the cleat. It's much easier to lift the horse's head up by pulling up on the chin and pulling down on the rope than it is trying to push up like this. It's very difficult to get it up like that, but it's quite easy to lift up on the chin and pull down on the rope. I have the power light attached to the top of the dental halter with some washers here just to hold it up there. I'm going to first demonstrate the Houseman type speculum and how to open it with the wolf tooth forceps, with the cap forceps. So put this in the mouth. You can see the speculum is quite easy to open. I made it into the 5th click quite easily, but if there was some difficulty, it's quite easy to just put this between here and open it up with this cap forceps with the grooved end in it. This is the speculum with the turning handles. The handles open it up by turning inward and close it by turning outward. I like to use the turning handles in the up position. So I simply install the incisor plates, step over here, tighten up the speculum. Standing in front of the horse, it takes around 35 seconds to open the speculum. When I look on the side, an arrow will line up to tell you when you're open, but I know from looking at the shaft when I'm about there, I'm at 3.5 inches as far as open. So now I'll simply put the horse's head in the dental halter. Then I'm going to wash the mouth out by shooting the water against the cheeks. And when I'm ready to start to float, I simply lift up the head and put the light on and start to float. Before I lift up the head, I'm currently using a water spray system. The water spray is attached, the nozzle is attached to the PowerFloat. I'm first going to put on the chamfer burr. I'm going to turn on the water spray for this and start to float. So I simply lift up on the chin, pull down on the rope. Horse's head is suspended in front of me at a fairly ideal angle. I'll put the light on. It's difficult to see the light in bright sunlight. And now I'll start to float. I'm on this side, so I'm going to float the outside of the uppers. It'll be like this. Come across, float the inside of the lowers. Then I'll flip it. Float the outside of the uppers on this side. Pop over and float the inside of the lowers on this side. So after something like that, I'm done the sharp enamel points. I never dip this into the water. I always clean the right angle with it outside the pail. Now I have the right angle. I'm going to finish up the turn points nice and slowly. Do a bit seat. Take off a few high edges. Use this to do the lower arcade. Now I'm going to use the upper 11 to get the back edge of the upper teeth. I go diagonal over the tongue to access the last upper tooth. And that's about how quickly I'm able to get any small hook off the upper 11. Now going to use the apple core for the front lower bit seat. I push out the cheek. Now I lift up the tongue and I come across to this side. And I finish the front edge. This horse is very lightly tranquilized. This is only for demonstration purposes. And basically I would have finished the float this way. Then I'd wash the mouth out, re-examine the mouth and do what is necessary.